Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Mr. Bell. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off, I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also, like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. On April 19, 1999, in Hikari City, Yamaguchi Prefecture, Japan, a brutal murder claimed the lives of a mother and her infant daughter. The perpetrator, a mere 18 years old, acted with chilling cruelty for an utterly irrational motive, showing no remorse. The victim's family fought tirelessly for justice, demanding the harshest penalty, only to face societal backlash. The question of whether a minor committing such a heinous crime deserves the death penalty and whether capital punishment itself should be abolished ignited fierce debate. When justice and human rights clash, how should society decide? Now let's revisit the Hikari mother and daughter murder, a case that shocked Japan, to explore the controversies and pain beneath it. At 10 p.m. on April 14, 1999, Hiroshi Motomura, a 23-year-old office worker at Nippon Steel, returned home exhausted after a long day. His family of three, wife Yayo Motomura, and 11-month-old daughter Yuka, lived in an employee dormitory in Hikari City, Yamaguchi Prefecture. Typically, Yaya greeted him, no matter how late. But that night, Hiroshi sensed something amiss as he approached their door. It was unlocked, the house pitch black and eerily silent. He pushed the door open, softly calling his wife's name, met only by an unsettling stillness. The living room was in disarray, chairs askew, unwashed dishes piled on the kitchen counter. A gnawing dread welled up inside him. To check if Yayoi had taken Yuka out, Hiroshi opened the wardrobe to see if her usual shoes and baby carrier were there. As the door creaked open, he noticed the bedding inside stacked oddly, as if concealing something. Peering closer, through gaps between the futons, he saw a horrifying sight. Frantic, Hiroshi shoved the bedding aside. Before him lay Yayoi, her limbs and face bound tightly with tape, lifeless. Stunned, he froze, unable to move for what felt like an eternity. Snapping back, he grabbed the phone with trembling hands and called the police. While awaiting their arrival, Hiroshi paced the house, desperately searching for Yuka. He checked every room, but she was nowhere to be found. Police arrived swiftly, launching a thorough search. By morning, they found 11-month-old Yuka inside the house. But the discovery was heartbreaking. She, too, was dead. Her tiny body, wrapped and stuffed into a storage space above the wardrobe, was a tragic sight, too painful to behold. Just days earlier, Hiroshi and Yayoi had marveled at Yuka's first smile, filled with hope for their future. In an instant, that joy was extinguished. Hiroshi and Yayoi met through an arranged introduction. Their romance began as students, deepening over time. After graduating, Hiroshi pursued a master's in engineering at Hiroshima University, while Yayoi worked in her hometown of Fukuoka. Despite the distance, they stayed connected through calls and letters, their bond unshaken. In Hiroshi's final university year, Yayo discovered she was pregnant. Though joyful, the news posed challenges. With Hiroshi still studying, both families opposed their marriage, questioning their readiness for parenthood. For Hiroshi, the pregnancy was a profound gift. Health issues had led doctors to warn he might never have children, casting a shadow over his life. Learning he would be a father overwhelmed him with emotion, strengthening his resolve to build a happy family with Yayoi. Their persistence won familial support, and they wed in 1997. Yuka arrived in May 1998, named with the hope she'd grow into a kind, radiant person like a summer sunset warming those around her. After graduating, Hiroshi joined Nippon Steel. Initially, he and Yayoi lived apart, each working toward their future. 2 months after Yuka's birth, he brought his wife and daughter to Hikari, settling into the company dormitory. From that moment, their life as a family of three truly began. For Hiroshi, days with Yayoi and Yuka were the simplest, happiest of his life. Yet, no one could foresee that this bliss would last a mere 9 months. Their warm, ordinary life was cruelly snatched away in a single night. Who was the killer? Why target a defenseless young woman and an 11-month-old infant? Police formed a task force to investigate. They noted Yayoi's wallet was missing, but other valuables remained untouched, and the scene showed no signs of ransacking or vandalism, unlike a typical robbery homicide. Though the front door was unlocked at the time of the crime, the lock was intact, with no evidence of tampering. Initially, police suspected an acquaintance. However, the Motomura's new Tahikari had few local connections. As recent graduates with clean records, they were unlikely to have enemies. If not an acquaintance, who was the culprit? As the investigation stalled, an elderly neighbor provided a crucial witness statement. She recalled seeing a man in a yellow-green uniform knocking on doors in the dormitory area that afternoon. This detail piqued police interest, as it matched the uniform of a local water equipment company in Hikari. Police reviewed the company's records, confirming no employees were assigned to the dormitory that day. They requested a list of employees meeting two criteria: access to the uniform and absence from work, due to leave, illness, or otherwise on the day of the crime. After screening, police showed photos to dormitory residents for identification. Based on the witnesses' testimony and investigation, they swiftly identified and arrested the suspect on April 18th, for days after the crime. Shockingly, the perpetrator was an 18-year-old named Taku Kiyotsuki. A local resident, he had recently graduated high school and began working at the water equipment company on April honest. Within 10 days, he exhibited troubling behavior. On April 9th and 13th, he skipped work, citing health issues, but spent his time playing video games at a friend's house or loitering in arcades overnight. On April 14th, still restless, he took another day off. That morning, to avoid suspicion from his family, he wore his work uniform before leaving, then resumed gaming at a friend's. Near noon, he returned home, ate quickly, and wandered out again. That afternoon, long-suppressed dark impulses surfaced. Takayuki, in the throes of youthful vigor, had developed an obsession with explicit videos since 9th grade, gradually harboring dangerous desires to act on them. As he matured, these urges intensified, eroding his rationality and moral boundaries, erupting fully that day. He targeted the employee dormitory, knowing most men were at work, leaving women alone. At the nearby Okita apartment complex, he posed as a water pipe inspector, knocking on doors to check bathroom plumbing, seeking a victim. Initially hesitant, fearing his disguise would be exposed, he acted tentatively. But as residents opened their doors without suspicion, he grew confident, believing he could succeed. His boldness surged, and he resolved to commit the crime. Around 2:00 Takayuki rang the bell at Hiroshi's 4th-floor apartment in Building 7. Yayo Motomura answered. Yuka was with her, watching TV in the living room. Takayuki lied, claiming he was inspecting bathroom pipes, planning to feign a check before attacking. Though he and Yayoi were strangers, he had long known of a young, attractive woman in the complex, developing an obsessive one-sided fixation. How he learned of Yayoi and why he targeted her will be explored later. Seeing Takayuki in a worker's uniform, Yayoi opened the door without suspicion, unwittingly inviting a wolf inside. Seizing her distraction, he grabbed her from behind, forcibly throwing her to the floor. Yayoi fought back desperately, but her slight frame was no match for the sudden assault. Fearing her resistance would alert neighbors, Takayuki's malevolence deepened. He clamped his hands around her, intent on silencing her permanently. After Yayoi lost consciousness, Takuki began his depraved act. He then bound her with pre-prepared tape to prevent her revival. Around 3 p.m., Yuka, noticing her mother's stillness, wailed loudly. Only 11 months old, she couldn't calm without comfort. Takayuki, fearing her cries would draw attention, grew increasingly agitated. Unable to soothe her, his anger erupted. He decided to silence her, as he had her mother. Grabbing Yuka as she crawled toward Yayoi, he treated her like an inanimate doll, mercilessly ending her 11-month life with a cord he carried. To delay discovery, Takayuki Otsuki hid Yayoi in the wardrobe and stashed Yuka in the overhead storage compartment. He meticulously wiped down surfaces where fingerprints might linger from his intrusion. To mislead police, he took Yayoi's wallet, containing roughly $300 in cash, about US 2.5, and 160 in vouchers, about US 50, to stage a simple theft. He also removed tools used at the scene, like cleaning agents, a spray bottle, and pliers, which could bear his prints. These calculated actions reveal not only premeditation, but also meticulous care to evade investigation. After the crime, Taku Kiyotsuki left the scene nonchalantly. He even used Yayoi's money to buy arcade tokens and snacks, his callousness chillingly devoid of conscience. How could an 18-year-old commit such acts? Takuchi Atsuki was born on March 16, 1981, in Hikari City, Yamaguchi Prefecture. At the time of the crime, he lived with his father, stepmother, 2 younger brothers, and grandmother, a household of 6. His current mother was his stepmother, and one brother, born 3 months before the crime, was a half-sibling. Takuki's father was volatile, cold, and neglectful, frequently violent. He met Takayuki's biological mother through an arranged match. Despite courtship, he coerced her into intimacy before marriage against her will. Takayuki was born into this strained union. Post-marriage, his father's violence escalated, targeting both his wife and young son. Takuki endured brutal treatment, at times life-threatening. A repairman with meager earnings, his father squandered money on alcohol and gambling. During financial strain, he bullied his wife into borrowing from her family. The household languished in poverty and turmoil, with constant marital strife. Takayuki's mother developed severe depression as a result. Before high school, Takayuki was obedient and dutiful. Though terrified of his father, he shielded his mother during assaults, often at great personal risk, sometimes losing consciousness. When his cohabiting grandmother fell ill, he tenderly cared for her, showing warmth and diligence. Despite a grim home life, he retained a flicker of kindness. At 12, a tragedy struck like a tempest, shattering his fragile psyche and marking a turning point in his character. On September 22, 1993, Takayuki returned from school. Stepping inside, he heard his father order him to clean the garage. Hesitating briefly, he complied. Opening the garage door, he was met with a devastating sight. A figure lay rigid and cold, surrounded by scattered excrement and blood, the air thick with despair. It was his beloved mother, lifeless. What crushed Takayuki further was his father's reaction. Unfazed and devoid of grief, he glanced at his wife with icy detachment, as if appraising a broken piece of furniture. "This is because you didn't study properly," he said, blaming Takayuki, then ordered him to clean up. A chilling dread enveloped Takayuki, like an invisible shadow tightening its grip. From that day, his inner world collapsed, and a dark, twisted impulse quietly took root. After his mother's death, his father remarried a Filipina med at a bar, fathering a son in January 1999. To Takayuki, his stepmother and new half-brother brought no warmth to their fractured family, deepening his sense of alienation. He grew distant, often wandering away from home. Planning to leave Hikari Post-High School for work elsewhere, he unexpectedly landed a job at a local water pipe company, forcing him to stay with his family. Takayuki's choice of Yayo Motomura as a target likely tied to his father. Both his father and Hiroshi Motomura worked at Nippon Steel, living in the company's dormitory, their homes less than 200 meters apart. Though not close, they had crossed paths. Takayuki's father frequently spoke of Yayoi at home with crude, suggestive remarks, openly praising her attractiveness and expressing desire. Shockingly, he discussed such matters in front of his underage son. These lewd comments fueled Takuki's fixation on Yayoi. He secretly observed her life, nurturing a powerful urge to violate her. This unchecked desire culminated in the horrific tragedy. After his son's crime, Takayuki's father faced media and public scrutiny. Far from remorse or apology, he offered none, coldly stating, "It's not my concern. My son committed the crime, shirking responsibility." His words exposed not only his failure as a father, but also a deeply rooted moral distortion. Though police arrested Takayuki 4 days after the crime, his capture didn't end the ordeal. Instead, it launched a 20-year legal battle. On May 8, 1999, the Yamaguchi District Prosecutor's Office, deeming Takayuki criminally liable, referred him to the Yamaguchi Family Court. Under Japan's juvenile law, offenders aged 18 to under 20 facing serious crimes like murder, life imprisonment, or fixed-term sentences first undergo juvenile hearings in family court. If deemed unfit for juvenile proceedings, the case transfers to district court for formal criminal prosecution. Juvenile hearings are closed, barring victims' families from attending or tracking progress. For Hiroshi Motomura, this meant an agonizing, voiceless wait. Having lost his wife and daughter, he couldn't access the full truth or voice opinions, forced to cooperate with police inquiries and face media questions. In those relentless, grief-stricken days, waiting was his only recourse. After 4 weeks, the court ruled Takayuki's crimes exceptionally heinous, warranting adult prosecution due to their severity, potentially death or life imprisonment. The case then entered public criminal proceedings. On August 11, 1999, the preliminary trial began. For the victim's family, reality remained harsh. They received only 3 reserved seats, competing with the public for remaining spots via lottery. Worse, they were stripped of any right to speak, express opinions, or question proceedings. This arrangement left them feeling the law's cold detachment. During the 4th preliminary hearing, in November 1999, Hiroshi brought photos of Yayoi and Yuka to court, but was stopped by the judge, who argued the images might affect the defendant's emotions. After debate, the judge reluctantly allowed them, but only covered in black cloth. That victims' families faced restrictions to spare the perpetrator's feelings while enduring the loss of loved ones was, for Hiroshi, like salt in an open wound. He couldn't fathom why a criminal of such magnitude deserved emotional protection while grieving relatives were forced to suppress their pain, listen silently, and were denied even a shred of dignity for their loved ones. At trial, Takuki appeared in slippers. Prompted by his lawyer, he bowed to the victim's family, offering a brief, "I'm truly sorry. I did something unforgivable." During questioning, he admitted all charges, maintaining consistent statements to feign remorse. Hiroshi expressed skepticism, accusing Takuki of performing for the court, his remorse a facade. He deemed the crimes unforgivable. The prosecution, unwavering, demanded the death penalty, a rare request for a juvenile reserved for exceptionally grave cases. Takuki's defense argued the crime wasn't premeditated but impulsive. Raised in an unhappy, emotionally unstable family, his psychological development was immature. Citing juvenile law principles barring death penalties for those under 18, they sought leniency. On March 22, 2000, the Yamaguchi District Court sentenced Takayuki to life imprisonment. The ruling acknowledged the crimes left no room for leniency, but noted his youth and apparent remorse suggested potential for rehabilitation, sparing him death. For the victim's family, this was unacceptable. In Japan's justice system then, life imprisonment didn't mean lifelong confinement. Good behavior could lead to parole in 7 to 8 years, especially under juvenile protections. This disparity left the family feeling the justice system's impotence and imbalance. At the press conference following the verdict, Hiroshi Motomura, choked with emotion, voiced his outrage and helplessness. Despairing of the legal system, he declared he no longer wished to appeal, only to personally end the perpetrator's life. This statement sparked widespread societal debate. Some deemed his words extreme, questioning whether the culprit deserved no chance at redemption, making Hiroshi a target of public criticism and immense pressure from misunderstanding. Beyond Hiroshi, another figure vehemently opposed the verdict: Prosecutor Yoshida, who handled the case. After the press conference, Hiroshi visited Yoshida's office. Furious, Yoshida said. These words pierced Hiroshi's despair, igniting a spark of hope. Determined that his wife and daughter's lives not be lost in vain, he embraced this mission, plunging into a battle for judicial reform. not only to ensure the perpetrator faced the law's severest penalty, but also to secure the rights and voice victims' families deserved. Alongside other victims' relatives, lawyers, and supporters, Hiroshi founded a nationwide organization called Tomorrow's Association. Tomorrow's Association aimed to unite voices, advocating for victims' families long silenced, fighting for their rightful dignity and entitlements. Their key demands included, first, the absence of basic victims and families' rights. Hiroshi highlighted that current criminal procedure laws omitted any mention of victims' rights, not even the word right, emphasizing a system biased toward protecting perpetrators while neglecting victims and their kin. Second, the state's monopoly on punitive authority. The justice system, with the state in a dominant position judging a weaker defendant, provided defendants numerous protections, yet stripped victims' families of even basic opportunities to speak or present in court. Third, the ban on bringing victims' photos to court. To convey his loss, Hiroshi tried displaying Yayoi and Yuka's photos, but was barred, underscoring victims' families' marginalized status. These demands swiftly drew a response from then-Prime Minister Obuchi Keizo, who acknowledged the law's inadequacy in aiding and protecting innocent victims, urging politicians to heed Hiroshi's plight. This stance garnered broad societal support. Though Obuchi suffered a stroke and died on May 14, 2000, 2 days prior, Japan's National Diet passed 3 landmark reforms: the Crime Victims Protection Act, the Criminal Procedure Amendment Act, and the Prosecutorial Review Amendment Act. These allowed victims and families to attend trials and voice opinions, no longer confined to silent observation. For the first time, Japan's justice system formally incorporated victims' perspectives, a milestone in victims' rights history. Buoyed by public support, the prosecution appealed to the Hiroshima High Court on March 28, 2000, demanding the death penalty for Takayuki Atsuki. During the appeal, the prosecution unveiled new evidence. On April 26, 2001, they presented letters Takayuki sent to friends from prison post-life sentence. Deemed critical by the court, these letters revealed his lack of genuine remorse. Self-proclaimed spokesman of God, judges, police, lawyers, prosecutors, no one has the right to judge me. Those two can't come back anyway. I'm curious how the court will play out. With good behavior, I'll be out in 7 to 8 years max. Either way, I'm intrigued by prison life and in no rush to leave. A friend, moved by Hiroshi's televised anguish, handed the letter to the prosecution, feeling compelled to aid him. The letter exposed Takayuki's feigned courtroom apology as a ploy for leniency, as Hiroshi had suspected. Takayuki claimed the letter was careless, meant to cheer worried friends, not expecting its public disclosure. His defense argued the prosecution's use violated Article 44 of the Constitution on male privacy, deeming it unconstitutional. The court rejected this. On September 7, 2001, the Hiroshima High Court began reviewing the appeal. The prosecution argued Takayuki's motive was despicable, his methods extraordinarily cruel, and his lack of genuine remorse or apology undermined the initial ruling's rehabilitation assessment. They reiterated the death penalty demand. On March 14, 2002, the Hiroshima High Court upheld the life sentence, rejecting the prosecution's appeal. Unconvinced, the prosecution and Hiroshi appealed further. Over time, the court held 12 hearings on the death penalty question. Rather than detailing each, key points are highlighted. Compared to Hiroshi, Takayuki received superior legal support. Japanese law provides state-appointed funded defense counsel, but Takayuki's team comprised volunteer private attorneys. By March 27, 2002, when the case reached the Supreme Court, this defense team of the century grew from 2 to 21 members, including prominent anti-death penalty advocates like Yasuda Yoshio and Adachi Shuichi, earning media acclaim. On June 20, 2006, the Supreme Court overturned the Hiroshima High Court's ruling, remanding the case for retrial. On May 24, 2007, the Hiroshima High Court began the retrial's first hearing. Sensing an unfavorable tide, all 21 defense attorneys attended. altering Takayuki's testimony and presenting new arguments. Takayuki, deprived of maternal love, clung to Yayoi unintentionally, causing her death, not deliberately. Some claimed he, influenced by the manga Makai Tensho, demonic reincarnation, believed his actions could revive her. Yuka's death was an accident from excessive force to quiet her crying. Takayuki aligned with these claims, amending his initial testimony, stating he hid the victims in the wardrobe, believing Doraemon would resolve everything. These absurd, far-fetched defenses sparked outrage in and beyond the courtroom, fueling societal discontent. The defense was criticized for disregarding victims' families' feelings, fabricating excuses to evade the death penalty, and faced intense backlash. Japanese citizens launched a petition demanding strict punishment for the defense team of the century, deepening public disdain for anti-death penalty advocates. After prolonged hearings and disputes, the case concluded on April 22, 2008. Judge Narukaze Yasuhide of the Hiroshima High Court sentenced Takayuki Atsuki to death. Narukaze noted Takayuki's 6.5-year denial of charges, with new defenses emerging late, deeming them anomalous and rejecting them. On rehabilitation, he criticized Takayuki's false excuses, indicating diminished reform potential. The defense's staunch anti-death penalty stance worsened Takayuki's courtroom impression. The defense immediately appealed to the Supreme Court for a reduced sentence, but it was rejected on February 20, 2012, finalizing Takayuki's death sentence. At the press conference post-sentencing, Hiroshi's face showed no triumph. Calm yet heavy, his voice carried a somber grief. He added that this wasn't an end but a phase. Though the trial closed, he'd carry the case's burden lifelong. Despite the verdict, Takayuki's defense persisted. On October 29, 2012, they filed for retrial with new forensic and psychological reports, but the Hiroshima High Court rejected it in October 2015 for lacking novelty. Similar appeals were dismissed by the Supreme Court in 2019 and 2020. In late 2020, the defense submitted fresh retrial requests, arguing Takayuki's childhood mistreatment by his father caused brain damage, impairing his criminal responsibility. These too were rejected. The defense continues filing appeals. Due to retrial requests and appeals, the death sentence remains unexecuted. Some suspect the defense, foreseeing an unchangeable outcome, files motions to delay execution. This high-profile case not only sparked heated debates on juvenile law and the death penalty, but also catalyzed judicial reforms for victims' families. Journalist Kodota Takashi chronicled Hiroshi's multi-year emotional journey in struggling with despair. Hiroshi Motomura's 300 Days, adapted into a 2-part TV drama, aired in September 2010, with Eguchi Yosuke as Kodota and Mishima Hidekazu as Hiroshi. It won the grand prize for TV drama at Japan's Agency for Cultural Affairs Arts Festival. In 2009, Hiroshi remarried a woman 7 years his senior, now living a simple, peaceful life. Once teetering on despair's edge after losing his loved ones, he endured grueling trials, public scrutiny, and inner torment. Post-storm, he rebuilt a family with a partner who understands his pain and resilience moving forward. His life bears past scars, yet he seeks peace and redemption in the ordinary. This tragedy's final chapter remains unwritten, but Hiroshi's steadfastness and compassion reveal the power of facing pain without abandoning justice or hope. As for Takayuki Atsuki, his turbulent upbringing, steeped in isolation and violence, likely sowed seeds for his later deviance. Yet, this past cannot justify his brutal theft of 2 innocent lives. As Hiroshi said during the initial life sentence, precisely because of this, the perpetrator must understand the immense value of the lives he took. Takayuki will bear his guilt lifelong, facing execution's looming fear, atoning bit by bit in prolonged, solitary wait for the lives he stole. Weta. This story is set in North Carolina, a state down in the southeastern U.S. along the Atlantic coast. North Carolina is famous for its awesome mountains and beautiful beaches. The state's economy does well with both farming and tech, making a unique mix of old traditions and modern stuff. Back in 2000, a mysterious guy showed up here. He mostly operated at night, going after McDonald's restaurants. His method was to drill a hole in the roof and then silently sneak in to rob the place, making a lot of locals feel uneasy. The cops tried to catch him many times but failed every time, even once when he managed to escape right under their noses. Today we're going to dive into the crime story of the roofman Jeffrey, and you're tuning in into True Crime in the World, where we uncover the darkest secrets and explore the most thrilling cases you might have never heard of. On Saturday, May 20, 2000, at 5 a.m. at a McDonald's on Main Street in Belmont, North Carolina, a few employees had just opened up to get ready for a new day. Suddenly, a masked man burst out of the bathroom holding a .22 caliber rifle and looking really threatening. The employees were scared out of their minds and did exactly what he told them. Surprisingly, the guy's voice was pretty polite. First, he asked everyone to sit down, but one female employee was too freaked out to move. He calmly said to her, "Ma'am, please sit down." He then threatened them into giving him the cash register code and told all the employees to wait in the walk-in freezer. He even reminded them to put on their coats so they wouldn't get cold. His actions and words were almost gentlemanlike, but if anyone resisted, he didn't hesitate to fire a warning shot. After that, he grabbed all the money from the cash registers and left away. Meanwhile, one of the employees hit the alarm button without him noticing. The police got there fast and ended up finding his trail in some nearby bushes and caught him. They grabbed a .22 caliber rifle, a drill, a hammer, a screwdriver, and a shovel. Turns out the robber was the notorious Jeffrey Allen Manchester. After getting caught, the 29-year-old Jeffrey didn't seem sorry at all. He just smiled and told the cops, "You finally got me." Dealing with such a cocky guy, the police didn't mess around and took him right to the station. After checking things out, they found a hole in the roof of the McDonald's, which was Jeffrey's usual way. Late at night, he'd drill a small hole in the roof when the place was empty, sneak in and hide in the bathroom. Then he'd wait until the employees opened up in the morning, rush out, and take over to get the cash register code. And this wasn't the first time he'd pulled this stunt. Starting in 1998, Jeffrey used the same trick to rob lots of McDonald's restaurants and other stores across the U.S. With over 40 hits and swiping about 100, zero in total, he was quick and always got away before the cops showed up. Because of his usual method, he was known as the rooftop robber or roofman, earning him a notorious nickname. But this time the cops finally nabbed him. Actually, Jeffrey's original plan that was to hit a different McDonald's 10 miles away. But after breaking in through the roof, he realized the place was closed and empty. Since he couldn't get the cash register code, he had to find another spot, which ended up getting him caught. Jeffrey was born in California and was a smart kid, making his parents proud. After finishing high school, he joined an airborne unit doing paratrooper stuff. There, he picked up skills like climbing, combat, evasion, and using all kinds of weapons, which set the stage for his future crimes. In 1991, at 20 years old, Jeffrey was sent to work at the Concord Naval Weapons Station. During that time, he fell in love and got married. They had 3 kids and were living happily, but that happiness didn't last. 8 years later, Jeffrey and his family moved into base housing at the same station. In November that year, his wife reported him to the cops several times for getting more aggressive. Their marriage fell apart. His wife got custody of the kids, and Jeffrey had to move out. With no family ties left, he totally lost it and started down a path of crime. He started committing crimes at 27 and got even more reckless after his divorce. He picked McDonald's as his target because all the stores had similar layouts, usually had just a few staff on duty, and were easy to control. At first, Jeffrey hit McDonald's restaurants in California, then branched out to Oregon, Nevada, Virginia, and Massachusetts, leaving a trail of crimes all over the U.S. The media dubbed him America's most polite thief, making him notorious from coast to coast. From 1998 to 2000, cops across multiple states tried to catch him but couldn't. He was sly and quick, always managing to slip away right under their noses. After finally getting caught, Jeffrey was charged with robbery, having a dangerous weapon, and kidnapping. Even though he confessed to all his crimes, he tried to make up a story to get a lighter sentence. claiming he was inspired by another robber and was just curious about the method. These excuses obviously didn't work, and he ended up getting sentenced to 45 years in prison. During his time in prison, Jeffrey was moved around different facilities in North Carolina before ending up at Brown Creek Correctional Institution. Everyone thought he'd quietly serve his time there, but no one expected he'd plan an escape from the place. Brown Creek Correctional Institution is in Anson County and is a state prison for men, up and running since 1993. With space for 200 inmates, it houses medium security prisoners and focuses on helping them reintegrate into society. The prison is surrounded by high walls and sturdy barbed wire fences, with watchtowers and guards patrolling 24/7. Lots of areas have surveillance cameras, and inmates are closely watched, making it impossible to escape. At first, when Jeffrey arrived, he was really cooperative and always worked hard. Thanks to his good behavior, he was seen as a model inmate and got the chance to work in the metal workshop. The work there was pretty light, and he even earned a small wage each day. While working, Jeffrey paid close attention to the guards, watched their shift changes, and even bought cigarettes to bribe them and build good relationships, hoping to get more advantages. Gradually, Jeffrey became familiar with the prison's layout and spotted blind spots in the surveillance cameras in the metal workshop. But this info alone wasn't enough. Figuring out how to get out without being noticed was still a big question for him. The most common way to escape prison is, of course, to dig a tunnel, but this method was too slow and easily spotted. Jeffrey came up with a smarter plan. He noticed that every afternoon, a truck would come to the metal workshop to pick up the stuff they made. Underneath the truck, near the back wheels, there was a space just big enough for someone to hide, but he needed to make something to blend in with the underside of the truck so he wouldn't get caught. One day, during a guard shift change, he quickly dodged the surveillance cameras and crawled under the truck, using a ruler to measure the empty space, making sure the plywood panel he planned to make would fit perfectly. In the next few days, Jeffrey bribed other inmates to get chewing gum, a mirror, and some magnets, key items for his escape plan. He figured chewing gum would help him look casual while outside the prison, so he wouldn't raise any eyebrows. The mirror would let him see around while hiding under the truck. After a while, he finished the rectangular plywood panel, 36 inches long and 5 inches wide, and painted it black. He even went as far as making an extra black cardboard piece with magnets attached, so it could stick to the back of the truck, giving him better cover. Everything was set. He just had to wait for the right moment. A rainy day. Jeffrey knew that when it rained, the guards wouldn't want to get wet, so they'd skip thorough outdoor patrols and stay inside, sipping coffee and chatting. More importantly, the high humidity on rainy days would mess with the guard dog's ability to track scents, boosting his chances of slipping away unnoticed. On Tuesday, June 15, 2004, in the afternoon, the sky was full of dark clouds. Jeffrey, now 33 years old, knew this was it. Soon enough, heavy rain started pouring down, and as usual, the truck stopped outside the metal workshop. Everything was going according to plan. As planned, he grabbed the plywood panel and the black cardboard he'd hidden, and while the guards were taking shelter from the rain, he slipped under the truck, placed the plywood panel across the underside, and attached the black cardboard with magnets to the back of the truck, making it look like just another part of the vehicle's undercarriage. Jeffrey lay on the plywood, curling up as tight as he could. The method worked. Unless you looked really closely, you wouldn't notice someone hiding under the truck. The driver loaded up the goods and drove off. When the truck passed through the security gate, the guards only gave it a quick glance, and no one spotted Jeffrey hiding underneath. By 3:03 p.m., the truck was on its way out of the prison. As Jeffrey held his breath, waiting for his moment of freedom beyond the prison walls, the driver unexpectedly pulled over not far from the prison. Jeffrey felt a surge of anxiety, but luckily, the driver got out without noticing him and went off somewhere. Using the mirror, Jeffrey checked around, and once he saw it was safe, he quickly crawled out from under the truck. Before breaking out of prison, Jeffrey had thought about making himself some civilian clothes. He cut the sleeves off his prison uniform and sewed them over the chest area to cover his inmate number. He also shortened the pant legs and used the extra fabric to make pockets. After these modifications, the prison uniform looked totally different, like regular clothes that wouldn't draw attention. After changing, he chewed some gum and ran quickly down the road. Before long, a car came along. Jeffrey immediately recognized the driver. It was a math teacher from the prison, but since Jeffrey had never been in his classes, the teacher didn't recognize him. Taking a bold chance, Jeffrey waved for a ride. To his surprise, the teacher stopped and gave him a lift. During the ride, Jeffrey chatted pleasantly with the math teacher, who didn't suspect a thing. At 4 p.m., the guards started the routine head count and discovered that Jeffrey was missing. Realizing how serious this was, they activated the prison alarm, and the police quickly showed up. After searching everywhere, they found no suspicious signs, and the surveillance cameras hadn't caught Jeffrey, which left them puzzled. It wasn't until the truck driver discovered the plywood panel and the black cardboard under the truck that they figured out how Jeffrey had managed to escape. After looking into it, the police thought that Jeffrey might have headed back to his hometown in California, where his ex-wife and 3 kids lived. They contacted his ex-wife, but she said she hadn't seen him and had cut off contact with him a long time ago. Jeffrey wasn't interested in his children and had never visited them, so she didn't know where he could be. News of Jeffrey's escape spread quickly and was all over TV. The math teacher after seeing the news, he realized that the hitchhiker he had picked up was the escaped inmate. He immediately contacted the police, telling them that Jeffrey had gotten out at a gas station along the way, but where he went after that was unknown. For now, the police had no clues. Actually, Jeffrey didn't go far. He believed that the most dangerous place was also the safest. After getting off at the gas station, he caught another ride and headed to Mecklenburg County in the city of Charlotte. This place was just over 30 miles from Brown Creek Correctional Institution. Jeffrey chose to go there because he'd planned it in advance. Mecklenburg County was known for having the lightest penalties for breaking into stores in North Carolina, making it the best hiding spot for him. Once he arrived, his first priority was finding a place and figuring out his food situation. After checking things out, he chose the Toys R Us store on the outskirts of Charlotte. He casually walked in like any regular customer, took a look around, and decided to make his hideout behind a bike rack. The bike rack was against the wall with a discreet space just big enough for someone to sleep. Jeffrey waited for a moment when no one was watching, slipped into the hiding spot, and only came out after Toys R Us closed for the night. During the night, he found the surveillance control center in the operation manual. After studying it, he set the system to continuously replay footage, making sure none of his activities in the store would be recorded. He then adjusted the alarm system so that taking items from the store wouldn't trigger it. Every night, Jeffrey crawled out from behind the bike rack to find food in the Toys R Us store. The place had plenty of cookies, canned goods, and similar foods, which Jeffrey found quite satisfying. After eating, he'd ride bikes around the store to get some exercise. When bored, he even went up to the roof to play with remote control cars. It was a comfortable life, but Jeffrey wasn't content with this. He completely forgot about his status as an escaped convict and still had thoughts of returning to his old ways, planning to find the right opportunity to rob the Toys R Us store for a big score. To pull off his plan, he installed his own surveillance cameras in various parts of the store to keep an eye on the employees' daily activities. After a while, he knew their routines well, and a new robbery plan started forming in his mind. Jeffrey didn't act immediately. Instead, he decided to wait until after Christmas. He knew that many parents would bring their kids to Toys R Us to buy gifts before Christmas, which meant the employees would be handling a lot of money. As Christmas approached, Toys R Us got busier, with more customers coming in, and sure enough, many parents brought their kids to pick out toys. The staff had to restock every day, and Jeffrey, worried about being discovered, narrowed his sleeping space. However, he still felt uneasy and decided to move to a new hiding place. Next to Toys R Us was a Circuit City electronics store that had shut down and was now abandoned with no one inside. The wall behind the bike rack and Toys R Us was adjacent to Circuit City, so Jeffrey drilled a hole in the wall to easily move back and forth between the two places. For more comfort, Jeffrey used wooden boards to create a small room under the stairs in Circuit City. He put up his favorite posters on the walls, made a door, and painted it to blend in better. He felt pretty secure living there. He then found a way to connect electricity and redirected the air conditioning from Circuit City so that his room could get cool air. He also installed a monitor in his room to watch what's happening inside Toys R Us without needing to go there. Compared to before, the new room was a bit larger, and he even put up a mini basketball hoop to play basketball in his free time. While the cops were tirelessly searching for him, Jeffrey was living a comfortable life with plenty of food, drinks, and entertainment. But he still felt bored. For months later, Jeffrey felt things had calmed down and started to expand his activities. During a walk nearby, he discovered a church just over 300 yards from Toys R Us. From then on, he began attending Bible study at the church every Wednesday evening to make his life more fulfilling. The church often organized fundraisers to buy toys and books for kids in orphanages, and Jeffrey took part in almost all of these events, donating a bunch of toys each time. Of course, these toys were stolen from Toys R Us. Thanks to his generosity, he gained the affection of many church members and became well known. Besides donating, Jeffrey also joined single social events organized by the church, and that's where he met a woman. They fell in love at first sight and quickly started a romantic relationship. The woman's name was Lily, 40 years old with 3 kids. She had just ended a 20-year marriage. To her, Jeffrey was very charming, spoke softly, dressed well, and often gave toys to orphans. He seemed like the perfect guy. Most importantly, Jeffrey was kind to her 3 kids, generously buying them gifts, and they gradually accepted their mom's new boyfriend. Whatever they wanted, Jeffrey always tried to make it happen. From then on, whenever he had free time, Jeffrey would visit his girlfriend and her kids. Lily felt very happy and believed she had found true love. Over time, their relationship grew closer. Lily was curious about Jeffrey's work and why he had so much money, so she asked to visit his workplace. Hearing this, Jeffrey immediately refused, lying that he worked in a top-secret government job that outsiders weren't allowed to enter, and he couldn't reveal any details about his work to anyone. He also said that he often lived right in the office building. Lily totally bought his story. She thought her boyfriend was really capable and was convinced she'd met a trustworthy man. Meanwhile, Jeffrey became even bolder, seemingly forgetting he was an escaped convict. Besides joining church activities, he also hit the gym to work out, maybe from eating too much kids' food from Toys R Us. Jeffrey got a toothache and had to see a dentist. After the appointment, he set fire to the clinic. The reason was that the clinic asked him for ID, and he realized that the records would expose his identity, so he made a reckless decision. Luckily, no one was hurt, and the cops didn't suspect Jeffrey. Over time, the employees at Toys R Us started noticing something was off. The number of toys in the store kept mysteriously decreasing, but the inventory records didn't show any discrepancies. There was only one possibility. Someone was stealing toys. With this suspicion, they checked the surveillance cameras, but they didn't know the cameras had been tampered with, so they found nothing unusual. Jeffrey knew that if this kept up, he'd eventually be discovered, so he needed to pull off the plan to rob Toys R Us right away. Before that, he needed a proper weapon. He found some guns at a pawn shop and didn't hesitate to rob the place, grabbing 2 pistols. The whole thing happened really fast. By the time the cops arrived, Jeffrey was long gone, and they had no clue it was him. On December 26, 2004, right after Christmas, Jeffrey, now 33, was ready to carry out his long-planned heist. Just like his previous McDonald's robberies, he wore a mask, went to Toys R Us, and used a gun to threaten the employees, ordering them into a storage room and telling them to lie down on the floor. But unlike McDonald's, Toys R Us had more staff, and since it was the Christmas season, there were even more employees, adding more pressure on Jeffrey. Amid the chaos, 2 employees managed to escape and called the cops. Jeffrey realized things were getting out of hand, so he quickly threatened the remaining employees to get the cash register codes. He grabbed a large amount of money and took off, but by then, the police had already arrived. He had a face-off with a female officer who tried to arrest him, but failed and got punched by Jeffrey. This was the first time Jeffrey had physically hurt someone since he started his robberies. 3 officers were injured and went down while Jeffrey made a quick getaway. Shortly after, backup arrived and did a thorough search of Toys R Us. A police dog sensed something odd and kept barking at a ceiling panel. When the officers opened it up, they found it stuffed with toys. After counting, the total value of these toys was about 70. This discovery confirmed the employees' earlier suspicions. They told the cops that for the past 6 months, the number of toys in the store never matched up. It was always mysteriously missing. At first, they thought it was due to inventory errors or supply issues, but over time, it happened more often, and even after reviewing the surveillance footage multiple times, they found nothing unusual, so they just gave up. They never imagined the toys were hidden in the ceiling, but actually, this was only a small part of all the missing toys. The police suspected that the robber had planned this ahead of time and might have been living right inside Toys R Us, which would explain how he managed to stash so many toys in the ceiling. Later, they found a hidden space behind the bike rack, with blankets and clear signs someone had been living there. On the wall, they found a hole leading into the next-door Circuit City store. This revelation shocked everyone on the scene. Turns out, the robber had been living there much longer than anyone could have imagined. A few days later, an officer went back to Circuit City for another look and noticed that a wall under the stairs looked odd, like it didn't need to be there. Out of curiosity, he checked it out more closely and discovered a secret door in the wall. It was hard to notice if you weren't paying close attention. When he pushed the door open, the scene inside left him stunned. Inside was a room about 3 meters long and 1.2 meters wide. The room had a single bed with Spider-Man sheets. The walls were covered with Spider-Man posters. The living necessities in the room were surprisingly complete. Not only was there electricity and water, but there was also a bicycle, weights, a rocking chair, and other stuff. Even a kid's portable toilet. There were also lots of DVDs in the room. Despite the cramped space, everything inside was neatly organized. It was hard to believe such a secret space could hold so much. Later, the cops found a fingerprint on a DVD titled, "Catch Me If You Can." After running the print, it matched Jeffrey, the fugitive who had escaped prison 6 months earlier. The police had been searching for him everywhere, but never imagined he was still in North Carolina. Based on the clues, Jeffrey had been around for a while. The cops figured he couldn't stay hidden in one room forever. Someone nearby must have seen him. So they took Jeffrey's photo and went door to door, asking the neighbors. Before long, 2 people recognized the guy in the photo and said they'd seen him at church. But he wasn't known as Jeffrey. He was John. He was a kind guy, always donating toys to kids in the orphanage. Everyone at church knew him. When they found out he was an escaped prisoner, people just couldn't believe it. To them, John was a good person, someone God had sent to them. The police questioned the pastor, and he said he was a good friend of Jeffrey's. Jeffrey had even given him 2 DVDs of Seinfeld. The first time Jeffrey showed up at church, he introduced himself as John, and everyone just called him that. Every week he came to the church events, and he even found love there. With the info from the pastor, the cops tracked down Jeffrey's girlfriend, Lily. She couldn't believe her boyfriend was actually an escaped convict. But after the police showed her some evidence, she had to accept the harsh truth. Lily told them that before she met him, she felt hopeless after her divorce. Jeffrey's arrival gave her the courage to start over. He was super generous, always buying her gifts. Right after they met, he gave her a big diamond ring. He also treated her 3 kids like his own. Jeffrey would often take the kids out on the balcony to look at the stars, just like a real dad. After putting the pieces together, the cops figured Jeffrey hadn't gone far and was still somewhere in Charlotte. They convinced Lily to help lure him back. They set up a plan for January 5th, which was also Lily's birthday. The day came quickly, and Lily called Jeffrey, telling him she was having a birthday party at her place and wanted him to come. As expected, Jeffrey agreed right away. That day, he showed up at Lily's door with flowers and gifts. As soon as he rang the bell, the police, who were waiting around the house, moved in and arrested him. After being caught, Jeffrey was allowed to call Lily. During the call, he apologized to her, saying he never meant to deceive her, but for certain reasons, he had no choice and felt really bad about it. He hoped that after all this, Lily would become stronger, take good care of her 3 kids, and maybe one day they'd meet again. Lily cried a lot on the phone, unsure if working with the cops had been a mistake. Jeffrey comforted her, saying he wasn't mad because this was bound to happen sooner or later. After they hung up, they both knew their relationship was over. Jeffrey admitted to all his crimes and calmly went over the details of each incident, like he was talking about something that didn't involve him. After that, the cops recovered some of the stolen cash based on what he told them, but the handgun he used in the robberies was never found. 11 months after Jeffrey's arrest, the case went to trial at the Mecklenburg County Court. He was charged with multiple counts of robbery. After deliberation, the jury unanimously found him guilty on all counts, and the court sentenced Jeffrey Manchester to 40 years in prison. He was then transferred to Central Prison in Raleigh to serve his time. Jeffrey's mom visited him in prison, and they had a short conversation. She asked him why he got caught, and Jeffrey replied casually, "Oh, it was nothing. I just got a bit careless." Although he was very cooperative with the cops after his arrest, he never explained why he went from being a soldier to becoming a dangerous criminal. Maybe it all stemmed from his failed marriage. He and his wife divorced, and he lost custody of his 3 kids. The loneliness and sense of failure grew inside him. Maybe he was seeking thrills and a sense of accomplishment, just wanting a secret identity like the room he built in Circuit City. He longed to live 2 lives like Spider-Man, immersed in the fantasy of being someone else. In February 2024, news came out that Jeffrey's story had been made into a movie called Roofman. He was portrayed as an adventurous spirit with a Robin Hood vibe. The movie is set to release in 2026. However, in the eyes of the cops, Jeffrey was very different from how he was shown in the film. They saw him as a cold-hearted person. He abandoned his kids, pointed guns at people's heads, and his actions caused emotional trauma to innocent victims. He knew the law and still chose to break it. A real bad guy. Once released, they were certain he'd be a danger to society again. The cops' words weren't without reason. Jeffrey later made 2 escape attempts in 2009 and 2017, both of which failed. The police refused to disclose the details of these escape attempts. In April 2020, Jeffrey made another escape attempt, and this time he succeeded. However, he only enjoyed freedom for a short time before being caught again. To this day, Jeffrey is still serving his sentence at Central Prison in Raleigh. Maybe he's still preparing his next escape. At 4 a.m. on December 17, 1968, Barbara, a 20-year-old college student, cracked open her motel room door. In an instant, 2 men dressed as police officers stormed inside. They sprayed chloroform, a potent anesthetic, rendering her mother unconscious. The intruders swiftly overpowered Barbara, dragging her outside and shoving her into a waiting car. The vehicle sped off into the night, disappearing into the eerie depths of a dense forest. There, Barbara was confined in a suffocating wooden box, no larger than a coffin. These strangers buried her alive, forcing Barbara to confront the breathless terror. Meanwhile, her desperate family launched a frantic search as the kidnappers relentlessly pressured them, demanding an enormous ransom. Trapped in the claustrophobic box, Barbara felt the air grow thinner, each passing second slicing into her dwindling hope of survival. This harrowing ordeal would later be chronicled in the book, 83 Hours Till Dawn, a gripping account of a hostage rescue that shocked the nation. This story unfolds in 1968, during the height of the Hong Kong flu pandemic. From the summer of 1968 to the spring of 1970, this global outbreak claimed roughly 4 million lives. By December of that year, the disease had swept into the United States, reaching Georgia and the university campus where Barbara Mackle was studying. Barbara, then 20, was an economics major. On December 14th, during a grueling exam, she began experiencing the debilitating symptoms of the Hong Kong flu and was forced to leave the testing room. Her throat burned so fiercely she could barely speak, and her head throbbed as if hammered with each pulse. Exhausted, Barbara longed to return home to recover. Her weakened state led her to self-isolate, a decision that unwittingly made her the perfect target for a horrifying kidnapping. That same day, Barbara called her Jane, her voice barely a whisper, as she explained she'd received no medical care. Overwhelmed healthcare workers and unreachable hospitals left her stranded. Upon hearing this, immediately drove from Florida to Atlanta to retrieve her daughter, a journey of roughly 9 hours. After leaving the university campus, Barbara and her mother checked into a room at the Roadway Inn, a few miles away in Decatur, to rest and recuperate. The Mackles were a well-to-do family, and Jane spared no expense, renting a room with 2 beds and a color television. She informed the front desk they would stay indefinitely until Barbara fully recovered. After 3 days of rest, Barbara's health began to improve. By Tuesday, December the 17th, she invited her boyfriend Stuart to visit. They ate, talked, and spent time together in the room. During their conversation, Barbara confided in Stuart about an unsettling feeling, a sense that someone was watching her. She couldn't pinpoint the source or identify who it might be. The invisible gaze sent chills down her spine. Stuart, trying to reassure her, suggested she might still be feverish, prone to mild hallucinations. He left later that evening as planned. That night, Barbara and Jane chatted in bed before turning in. They made plans to return to Florida soon, as Barbara was nearly recovered, and the university had closed for the Christmas break. Exhausted, Barbara drifted into sleep, unaware that in just a few hours she would face the most terrifying moments of her life. At 4 a.m., Barbara jolted awake to urgent knocking at the door. In 1968, motels like the Roadway and were not entirely secure. Their outward-facing doors left rooms vulnerable to anyone passing by. The knocking persisted, followed by a voice, "Ma'am, I need to speak with Barbara Mackle." "It's about our boyfriend, the one driving the white Ford. He's been in an accident and is in the hospital. He asked us to bring her to him." Barbara and Jane leapt from bed. Peering through the peephole, they saw a man in a police hat, accompanied by a shorter figure. Barbara hesitated, her mind racing. It's 4 a.m. Why would Stuart be in an accident? He's never out this late. Doubt gnawed at her, but Jane urged her to open the door and find out what was happening. Reluctantly, Barbara unlocked the door. In a flash, the 2 men barreled inside, slamming the door behind them. The taller one brandished a gun, cornering the mother and daughter against the wall. The shorter man approached Jane, clutching a bottle of anesthetic and a cloth. Jane screamed, pleading with the intruders to spare them, offering money, the car, jewelry, anything to ensure their safety. But her cries fell on deaf ears. The chloroform-soaked cloth was pressed against her face, and within seconds, Jane collapsed unconscious. Now alone, Barbara begged the kidnappers not to use the chloroform on her. Surprisingly, her pleas seemed to work, and the men refrained for the moment. As they restrained her, Barbara's mind reeled. Why her? Why target her in the dead of night at a remote motel in Decatur? The question swirled unanswered. She was marched out of the room at gunpoint, the barrel pressed into her back. They forced her into a waiting car outside. Barbara sat frozen, her mind blank, too terrified to resist. An hour and a half later, around 5:03 a.m., the night shift clerk at the motel snapped awake to the blaring sound of a car horn echoing from the parking lot. The relentless noise pierced the early morning silence. Irritated, the clerk rushed outside, shouting for the noise to stop before it woke the entire area. But he froze at the sight before him. A woman, bound tightly inside a car, frantically slamming her head against the steering wheel to sound the horn. It was Jane, Barbara's mother. Somehow Jane had regained consciousness. Defying her restraints, she stumbled from the room to her car. In a desperate bid for attention, she used her head to trigger the horn, sending out a piercing alarm into the night. The motel clerk frantically untied Jane. The moment she was free, Jane screamed in desperation. "They've taken my daughter. Please call the police. Hurry, get me a phone." That same morning, Robert, Barbara's father, was jolted awake by the piercing ring of the telephone. On the line, local Georgia police delivered devastating news. His daughter had been kidnapped. His wife, Jane, had been sedated but miraculously was unharmed. Robert sprang into action, leveraging every connection at his disposal. He demanded that local police coordinate with the FBI, certain a ransom demand would soon follow. Simultaneously, he arranged a private jet to fly to Georgia within hours. In no time, 105 FBI agents were mobilized, pouring every resource into the kidnapping case. Meanwhile, Barbara, ripped from her motel room in the dead of night, found herself stranded in a desolate forest, far from any sign of life. Her captors led her to a shallow pit where a wooden box, just large enough for a single person, awaited. A chilling replica of a coffin, Barbara, gripped by panic, pleaded hysterically, "I'll behave. I swear I won't scream. I won't do anything. Just please don't bury me alive," she repeated, her voice breaking with despair. But one of the men responded with icy detachment. "Calm down, we're not burying you alive. You'll stay here until your parents pay the ransom, make a scene, and I'll use the chloroform. And trust me, waking up in there will be far worse." Her fear was uncontainable, and Barbara continued begging not to be locked in the box. Finally, one of the kidnappers lost patience. He pressed a chloroform-soaked cloth to her face. As she slipped into unconsciousness, Barbara was forced into the coffin, barely aware of the nightmare unfolding. In her dazed state, the kidnappers handed her a sign reading, "Kidnapper and kidnapped victim," and snapped a photograph, proof that Barbara Mackle was still alive. The image, along with a ransom demand, was sent to her family. Once the photo was taken, the box was sealed shut. The kidnappers began shoveling dirt over it. Barbara was officially buried alive, her fate now hinging on whether her family would meet the ransom demands. Barbara later recounted, "When I came to inside that box, I started screaming, pounding my hands and feet against the walls, trying to break free. I thought I'd lost my mind, gone insane in there. It couldn't be real. I begged God not to abandon me. Then I started talking to myself, just to stay sane." In near total darkness, Barbara could barely see. From above, her captors spoke through a PVC pipe connected to the box, attempting to reassure her. They told her the box contained food, water, a small blanket, and a flashlight. If it rained, a pump would prevent flooding, ensuring she wouldn't suffocate. In a cruel irony, the kidnappers had meticulously prepared the box to make Barbara feel comfortable in her temporary tomb. They even included a box of sanitary pads and a note claiming that if her family didn't pay the ransom within 7 days, she would still be released. As the harrowing hours dragged on, Barbara was left alone in the depths of her underground prison. Back at the Mackle family home, the telephone rang. Answering it was Odowad, a close family friend, as Robert had already flown to Georgia, where his daughter was taken. On the other end, a kidnapper's voice cut through, cold and deliberate. "Dig in the yard, under the palm tree. You'll find what you need." Then the line went dead. Odode rushed to the Mackle's yard, zeroing in on the palm tree mentioned. Beneath a stone, he found a glass bottle containing a 3-page ransom letter. Its contents were bone-chilling. "Barbara is buried in a box. She's alive, but she'll suffocate if you don't pay 500. She has enough supplies to survive for 7 days, no more. The money must be used. 20 bills, unmarked, untraceable, and bundled in stacks of 500 stacks in total. When Robert Mackle has the money ready, he must place an ad in the classified section of the Miami Herald reading, 'Darling, please come home. We will pay all expenses no matter the time. Your family is here.' Once the ad is published, the phone will ring again with instructions for the exchange." At this point, you might be wondering, who is Barbara Mackle? And why was her family targeted with such an astronomical ransom? In 1968, 500 was equivalent to roughly 4 million today. To understand why, let's delve deeper into Barbara and her family's story. Barbara Jane Mackle was born on October 19, 1948, the daughter of Robert and Jane Mackle, residents of Florida. Barbara was born into privilege as her father, Robert Mackle, along with his brothers, owned one of America's largest real estate conglomerates. Founded by Robert's father in 1908, the company pioneered planned residential communities. They would buy land, build 35 homes, sell them all, and reap massive profits. Today, this model is commonplace, but back then, it was revolutionary. As a result, the Mackle family amassed a fortune worth approximately $20 million in today's dollars. Despite their wealth, the Mackles were known for their humility. Friends described them as unpretentious, never flaunting their fortune with extravagant clothing or lavish lifestyles. Barbara embodied this ethos. She was hardworking and ambitious, having attended elite private girls, where she earned numerous academic awards. She graduated high school as valedictorian, achieving the highest score in her final exams. Yet, like her parents, Barbara remained grounded. She was friendly and inclusive, connecting with people regardless of their background, public or private school, blue collar or white collar. To Barbara, who you were mattered more than where you came from. At the time of her kidnapping, Barbara was dating Stuart Woodward. The couple had plans to move in together while completing their studies, but a horrific event shattered those dreams. The Mackle family's vast wealth made them an ideal target for kidnappers, and Barbara, their beloved daughter, was any parent's greatest vulnerability. Events unfolded as expected. Despite the FBI's urging not to pay the ransom, Robert resolved to withdraw $500 from his bank account and place the classified ad as instructed. To him, no risk was worth taking when his daughter was buried alive. Federal agents tried to reassure him, "Don't worry, sir, we'll find your daughter. The ransom note says she has enough supplies for 7 days. Give us at least 7 days to track her down." But Robert couldn't wait. The thought of Barbara enduring another second in that hellish confinement was unbearable. To prove Barbara was still alive, the kidnappers sent the photograph of her in the box, holding the sign. The money was withdrawn, stacks of 20 bills neatly packed into a bag, awaiting the publication of the ad. On December 19, 2 days after the kidnapping, Robert received a call instructing him to head immediately to Biscayne Bay, Florida. Without hesitation, he boarded his private jet, racing back from Georgia to Florida. Over the phone, the kidnappers directed him to a sand mound at Biscayne Bay, where a blinking box would mark the spot to leave the ransom. Robert wasted no time, landing in Florida after a 90-minute flight. He drove to Biscayne Bay, scouring the area for the mound and the flashing box. But there was nothing. He stood there, seething, clutching a bag stuffed with $500, unsure of what to do next. Meanwhile, underground, Barbara remained trapped in a box that reeked of decay. Despite the ventilation system, the stench of sweat, urine, tears, and fluctuating temperatures drove her to the brink of despair. She heard nothing but her own anguished cries. No visitors. No responses. Never had she felt so utterly alone. In his confusion, Robert drove to a small wooded area near a bridge in Biscayne Bay, a location mentioned in the kidnapper's call. There, he quietly placed the bag containing $500,000, clinging to a fragile hope that the kidnappers would find it. Then he left. As he drove away, he collapsed in anguish, convinced he had botched everything. He feared the kidnappers wouldn't locate the money, and that Barbara wouldn't survive the box. But then, something unthinkable happened. As Robert drove off, a woman living near Biscayne Bay heard the hum of a motorboat's engine. It was still dark, and Robert had taken every precaution to act discreetly. At the time, the area around Biscayne Bay had been plagued by burglaries. Hearing a boat at night, the woman feared thieves were approaching from the water and immediately dialed 911. Miami police descended on the scene, the very area where the woman reported the suspicious sound. It was 5 a.m. Upon arrival, officers spotted 2 men sprinting near the wooded area. Their movements weren't those of early morning joggers. They were fleeing, clutching a bag. The police shouted for them to stop and gave chase. But in the darkness, visibility was poor, complicating the pursuit. After a search, officers discovered an abandoned Volvo near the woods. Inside was a bag brimming with so much cash, it left them stunned. Clearly the kidnappers, panicked by the sudden police presence, had fled without the money. Ironically, the Miami police, summoned over a suspected burglary, were unaware of the ransom exchange. Faced with a fortune and no clear protocol, they contacted the FBI. When Robert learned the ransom drop had failed, that the kidnappers had been spooked by the Miami police, He was on the verge of breaking. He begged the FBI to act, return the money, contact the kidnappers, explain it was a misunderstanding. He hadn't set a trap. Nearly 3 days had passed, and Barbara was still entombed in that horrific box. Robert knew she couldn't endure much longer. He insisted at any cost she had to be saved. The FBI agreed to issue a public statement in Robert Mackle's name, clarifying he had no involvement in the Miami police's intervention. He stressed he hadn't requested it, was ready to pay, and urged the kidnappers to reach out again. At 10 p.m. on December 19, the Mackle family's phone rang with instructions for a new drop-off location. Robert didn't hesitate. He rushed to the site, left the money as directed, and this time the exchange went smoothly. No police interference. But then silence. No calls followed. That night, Jane and Robert waited anxiously, hoping for word of their daughter's whereabouts. The night dragged on, dawn broke, and still no response. The Mackle family began to sink into despair. Meanwhile, the FBI had launched a manhunt to identify the kidnappers. In the abandoned Volvo, they found a passport belonging to Ruth Eisenman Shear and 2 plane tickets to Las Vegas. One in her name, the other for Gary Christ. Inside the car were photos of Barbara holding the kidnap sign. The hunt was on, with hopes of apprehending the criminals before Barbara succumbed underground. At first glance, it seemed straightforward. The FBI had the suspects' identities. But the problem was, the kidnappers had succeeded in the second ransom drop, pocketing 500. With that sum, they could vanish in an instant. Yet the FBI took some comfort in reviewing Ruth and Gary's profiles. These weren't hardened professional killers. Neither had taken a life, at least not yet. Gary Christ was born on April 29, 1945 in Alaska, raised in a family of salmon and shrimp fishermen. From a young age, Gary earned a reputation as a rifling through drawers and pocketing candy at the local store. At 14, he was caught stealing a car and sent to a juvenile reformatory. After a year, he returned to his parents in Alaska, attempting to finish school and graduating high school in 1963. Fed up with Alaska's brutal winters, Gary moved to California, seeking new opportunities. At 18, he married Carmen, and 17. Soon after, they welcomed their first child. But for Gary, a quiet life with a modest paycheck was unbearable. Like many criminals, normalcy gnawed at him. He returned to crime, starting with car theft, and predictably was caught. After a few months behind bars, Gary secured conditional parole, vowing to reform. But his promises were empty. Instead of turning his life around, he chose to escape. On November 11, 1968, Gary and a fellow inmate began plotting a prison break. For weeks, they secretly sawed through their cell windows bars, replacing them with makeshift materials to fool the guards. They stuffed their beds to mimic sleeping figures during checks. Then, Gary and his cellmate slipped through the window, crept across the prison yard, and scaled the fence. But alarms blared. Floodlights snapped on, pinning them in their glow. Guards shouted for them to stop. Once, twice, 3 times. Shots rang out. Gary pressed on, while his accomplice was hit and fell from the fence, meters above the ground. And then, Gary miraculously cleared the fence, vanishing into the night. After the escape, he sought out his wife and young son. The family fled to Boston, where Gary adopted the alias George Dickon. Claiming to be 28, growing a beard, and landing a job as a lab technician, a skill he'd picked up in prison, but as always a stable, monotonous life bored Gary. Despite Carmen giving birth to their second child, he grew restless with the repetitive grind of family life. In September 1968, Gary signed on as a sailor for a 2-week voyage. It was on this trip that he met Ruth Eisenman Shear, a 26-year-old student who would later become his accomplice in Barbara's kidnapping. Ruth was the one who disguised herself as the shorter man during the motel break-in, concealing her identity. Born in November 1942 in Honduras, Ruth grew up in an intellectual family. Her father a scientist, her mother a doctor. No one could have imagined a woman like her would be involved in burying a 20-year-old alive for ransom. When she came to the U.S. to study, Ruth was fluent in Spanish, French, German, and English, taking on odd jobs to support herself. Ruth and Gary met aboard that fateful ship. Sparks flew, and they quickly began a romance. Upon returning home, Gary bluntly told Carmen he no longer loved her and ordered her to leave with their 2 children. Heartbroken, Carmen complied. In hindsight, it was likely for the best, as Gary's next actions would prove that escaping him was the right choice. With Carmen gone, Ruth moved in with Gary. He began planting a reckless idea in her mind. Kidnapping a wealthy person and extorting their family for ransom could change their lives overnight. Once their identities were uncovered, Ruth Eisman and Gary Christ were placed on the FBI's most wanted list, ranking among the top 10 fugitives. Ruth made history as the first woman ever to appear on this list. At 3 p.m. on a late December day in 1968, the FBI received an anonymous call from a man with a chilling tone. Listen carefully. I'll only say this once. He revealed that Barbara was buried in a dense forest near Berkeley Lake, Georgia, just south of Atlanta. The FBI immediately dispatched 8 vehicles carrying agents to the reported area to search for the missing woman. But in 1968, the forest was vast, and without modern technology, the search posed a daunting challenge. Officers trekked through the thick underbrush, scanning for any sign of Barbara. Hours ticked by, each one heavier than the last. If she was there, surely she'd make some noise. A knock against the box, a faint cry for help. Yet, after relentless searching, despair began to creep into the team. Some feared she may have already suffocated. Just as hope was fading, a sudden sound broke the silence. Thunk, like someone striking wood beneath the earth. The team froze. An agent called out, "Barbara, if that's you, knock again." Immediately more knocks echoed, clearer and closer this time. Following the sound, agents spotted a PVC pipe protruding from the ground. Barbara was right there, near inches below the surface. The team dug frantically, hands and shovels moving in unison. After exactly 12 minutes, the soil was cleared, and the box's lid was pried open, revealing Barbara inside. Drenched in humidity and sweat, the young woman sobbed uncontrollably, her voice trembling as she begged to be pulled out. Too weak to stand, she was carried from the forest by the agents. Her first words, gasped in a frail whisper, were, "My parents, are they okay?" After 83 hours buried alive, Barbara Mackle was finally free. She was rushed to a hospital for treatment and recovery. Doctors noted she had lost 22 pounds in just 3 days and was severely dehydrated. Yet, astonishingly, her mental resilience shone through. She was overjoyed to be alive. During her captivity, Barbara revealed she hadn't dared drink the water in the box, fearing the kidnappers had laced it with sedative. While Barbara's rescue dominated headlines, Gary and Ruth remained at large. With 500 in hand, the pair spent recklessly. Gary boldly traveled to Palm Beach, not far from Miami, where the kidnapping had sparked a national frenzy to buy a 2-300 boat, paying in cash. A stranger flashing that much money raised immediate suspicion, and the seller promptly alerted authorities. A breathless chase ensued on the water. Gary daringly navigated the boat through Palm Beach's intricate waterways, aiming for the open ocean, but the FBI was quick to respond. They ordered him to stop, but Gary ignored them, flooring the throttle as the boat tore across the waves. He skillfully evaded the FBI's pursuit, vanishing into the vast ocean. The manhunt escalated to its highest level. Furious and humiliated by losing their suspect, the FBI deployed helicopters to scour Florida, alerted all patrol units, and issued an urgent bulletin. Anyone spotting Gary, or his boat, must report it immediately. On December 21st, a helicopter spotted Gary on Hog Island, a small, overgrown island in inland Florida. Realizing he'd been found, he abandoned the boat and fled into the dense forest. Police unleashed tracking dogs, but the swampy terrain slowed their progress. The hunt stretched into a grueling 12-hour ordeal on Hog Island. Finally, exhausted and hopeless, Gary stumbled out from a thicket, hands raised in surrender, muttering weakly, "I'm done. Can I have some water?" Though Gary was in custody, he insisted Ruth wasn't with him. True enough, The FBI found no trace of her since the second ransom drop. It wasn't until 3 months later, on March 5, 1969, that a new lead emerged. After splitting the ransom, had fled to Oklahoma, where she met an 18-year-old named John Ray. Ruth told John she was escaping an abusive family and needed help starting over. Trusting her, the young man assisted her in finding a place to stay and a job. Ruth was hired as a nurse at a local hospital. But when her employer requested fingerprints for a background check, her cover unraveled. As expected, the fingerprints matched those of a wanted fugitive. Ruth, too, was apprehended. In Georgia, kidnapping for ransom carried the possibility of a death sentence. Both Gary Christ and Ruth Eisenman Scheer faced a trial that would determine their fate. During her defense, Ruth claimed her love for Gary had clouded her judgment. She only wanted to follow him into a life of luxury and insisted she never harmed Barbara. Ultimately, she was sentenced to 7 years in prison for kidnapping. After serving her term, Ruth was deported to her native Honduras, permanently banned from returning to the United States. Gary, by contrast, showed no remorse. He strutted defiantly in court, offering a flimsy defense and even attempting to plead insanity. The prosecutor, unyielding, demanded the death penalty by electric chair, arguing that such a punishment must be used to its fullest extent. Most jurors agreed with the death sentence, but 4 staunchly opposed it, sparing Gary and securing him a life sentence instead. During the trial, Barbara unexpectedly stood and thanked Gary for alerting the FBI after receiving the ransom, for not killing her, and for leaving food and water in the box. As the life sentence was announced, Gary showed no reaction, silently exiting the courtroom. Yet, in prison, he continued to draw attention. In 1969, he filed a complaint about the size of his cell. Due to his prior escape, he was confined to a maximum security unit, a windowless solitary cell, completely isolated. At Christmas 1969, Gary Christ and Ruth Eisenman Scheer sent Barbara a holiday card, wishing her a joyful season and apologizing for the kidnapping. While incarcerated, Gary wrote an autobiography, predictably centering on the Barbara Mackle case. He smuggled the manuscript out, and the book entitled Life was published. After serving 10 years of his life sentence, Gary was astonishingly granted conditional parole. The court reviewed the case and noted that Barbara had not been physically assaulted or abused during her captivity, deeming the crime cleanly executed. Undeterred, Gary went further, petitioning for a full pardon to pursue his dream of studying medicine. Shockingly, this request was granted, despite the Mackle family's outrage. Gary later graduated from medical school and worked at a hospital for 4 years, until he was fired for inappropriate comments to patients. Unfazed, he pivoted to chartering a yacht, slipping into Colombia to smuggle cocaine. But the FBI, ever vigilant, caught him with 37 pounds of cocaine and 4 undocumented immigrants aboard, who had paid Gary to be smuggled into the U.S. On January 19, 2007, Gary was convicted of drug trafficking, sentenced to 5 years, and released early in November 2010 for good behavior. Today, Ruth and Gary are still alive but no longer in contact, each leading separate lives after their years behind bars. As for Barbara, she collaborated with journalist Gene Miller to write 83 Hours Till Dawn, a detailed account of the nightmare she endured. She described the book as her way of closing that chapter, never to revisit it. In it, Barbara vividly recounts the dampness, the paralyzing fear, and the sheer horror of being buried alive. After her rescue, she took months to recover before returning to school to complete her degree, determined to rebuild her life. In April 1971, Barbara married Stuart Woodward, her boyfriend at the time. They had 4 children together. Stuart has since passed away, but Barbara, now 77, is still alive, living quietly after surviving the harrowing ordeal of her youth. What if you met a woman who was incredibly beautiful, with an amazing body, elegant manners, and a soft voice? She seemed like an angel to a lot of people, but everyone who met her died tragically. Both her husbands died in a mysterious way, Her relatives had strange accidents, and even her housekeeper also had bad luck. In other words, even her closest loved ones couldn't escape the clutches of this beautiful girl's crimes. Surprising, isn't it? You're listening to the case of Yeom Min Suk, the wife who killed 2 husbands for insurance money, on True Crime in the World. Over 5 years, Yeom Min Suk committed a lot of terrible crimes. She used her innocent appearance and manipulated people, tricking everyone around her. By the time she was caught, the people she hurt and their families were shocked. They couldn't believe the angel they admired was a real demon. What she did is as bad as the famous American serial killer, Belle Gunness. Yeom Min Suk was born on January 27, 1976 in Hongshan County, Gangwon Province, South Korea. She grew up in a normal family with 4 kids. She had an older brother, a younger brother, and a younger sister. Her parents worked hard to support their children and raise them right. Yeom Min Suk was really beautiful, even as a child, with her fair skin and beautiful features. But even though she looked innocent, she was a problem child. She wasn't interested in school, she would steal small things, and she often got into fights with other kids. By high school, Yeom Min Suk seemed to get better. She started focusing more on school and staying out of trouble. As she got older, she became really interested in fashion, but then she became addicted to shopping. Her closet was full of new clothes, but buying new things only made her happy for a short time. In high school, she started acting recklessly again. One day, she drugged one of her classmates and stole their credit card. Then she went on a shopping spree and bought all kinds of expensive things. Can you believe she drugged her classmate? When the school found out, they kicked her out because they thought she was a bad influence on the other students. A few years later, her family got her into a different high school in Seoul, hoping for a fresh start. When she was 21, Yeom Min Suk graduated and got a job helping clients with their finances. That same year, she met Lee, who would become her husband. Lee was the same age as Yeom Min Suk. He was a young, healthy guy working as a mover in Seoul. He had mental health problems and had to take medication. But Yeom Min Suk didn't seem to. Why wasn't she worried about his mental health problems? They were attracted to each other and quickly started dating. She moved in with Lee. Less than a year later, she got pregnant and they got married. Both were poorly educated and didn't earn much money. On top of that, Yeom Min Suk couldn't control her shopping desires. Married life wasn't as happy as she imagined. Financial struggles and countless responsibilities piled up to pay for her expensive lifestyle. She always made excuses to visit her parents and steal their savings. That same year, Yeom Min Suk's father passed away. While her family grieved, she seemed indifferent to the loss, even callously using her father's credit card after his death to fund her excessive spending. Returning to In-suk's small family, the couple could only rely on Lee's income to get by. When their daughter was born, they had to bear additional expenses for the baby. In-suk often faced financial problems, argued with her husband, and caused the household to fall into chaos and disorder. Their marriage dragged on like this for 2 years, until an event occurred that completely changed the course of her life. In February 2000, their daughter, who was almost 3 years old, was left home alone while her parents went to look for temporary jobs, which were hard to find in busy Seoul. This was according to news reports and court documents. The little girl climbed onto a table and fell, hitting her head on the hard floor. When her parents got home, they found her passed out and took her to the hospital right away. But it was too late. She died from a head injury. The death of their daughter really upset Yeom Min Suk, or at least that's what she said. She said she had really bad depression and had to see a psychiatrist's treatment, including the use of medication. Strangely enough, they got a lot of money from the insurance company because of their daughter's death. Yeom Min Suk didn't have to worry about money for their child anymore, and her life became easier. She started spending a lot of money again and had more money than she'd had since getting married. One day, she was looking at a new designer handbag and had an evil idea. Can you believe what happened next? The following month, In-suk took advantage of her position to continuously purchase accident insurance for her husband. We ended up with 4 personal accident insurance policies. An evil plan was brewing in her mind. In front of her husband, she continued to play the role of a devoted wife, carefully taking care of his daily life while waiting for the right opportunity. It was a Saturday, and both Yo Min-suk and Lee were home, enjoying a day off. As she got her husband's medication ready, Yo Min-suk started her evil plan. Can you believe how evil she was? Their home had a lot of prescription drugs because they both had different health problems. Yo Min-suk saw her chance. She switched Lee's psychiatric medication with her own antidepressants and gave him a much higher dose. Lee didn't suspect anything and took the pills. The drugs started working quickly. Lee felt dizzy, his vision blurred, his body weakened, and he got really sleepy. He couldn't understand what his wife was saying. They were standing near the staircase and Lee, high on the drugs, didn't see the danger. Yo Min-suk took her chance and pushed him down the stairs. Lee's head hit the hard surface with a loud thud. She pretended to panic and called an ambulance, acting like she had nothing to do with his fall. Lee was diagnosed with a brain injury, just like the injury that killed their daughter. But his body, from working hard for years, saved him. After a few days of rest, he fully recovered. At the time, we couldn't remember things clearly and didn't know exactly what had happened. Yo Min-suk pretended to be upset and innocent, saying she was doing housework when she heard a loud noise. She found her husband at the bottom of the stairs and apologized a lot for not being there to stop him from falling. He believed she was sorry and told her it was an accident and not her fault. Yo Min-suk's plan didn't work. She didn't get the insurance money she wanted, and they were still struggling financially. But she was still planning to do something bad. Can you believe she tried to kill him again? In less than a month, she committed her second crime. In-suk repeated her old trick, drugging her husband and pushing him down the stairs again, causing a second traumatic brain injury. This time, the injury was more severe than before. In-suk's scheme finally succeeded. Due to her husband's accident, she received $340,001 in insurance compensation. Although the amount wasn't significant, it led In-suk to discover a new source of money. She believed she could rely on this method to continue making money. Due to her excessive spending, the $340,001 in insurance money quickly ran out. She continued to use sweet words, maintained the image of a gentle wife, and waited for another opportunity to strike. In South Korea at that time, you got the most insurance money if someone died, and the second most if they lost their eyesight. Yo In-suk had worked in the insurance industry for years, so she knew how it all worked. She started making another evil plan. One night in the middle of May before bed, Yo In-suk knocked her husband out by drugging him. Once she was sure he was asleep, she took a needle, forced his eyelid open, and stabbed his eye with the needle. Can you believe she did that to her own husband? The pain woke Lee up, and he realized he couldn't see anymore. Yo In-suk pretended she didn't know what happened and acted concerned. She took care of him and gave him some tea, then insisted on taking him to the doctor. The doctor said there was damage to his eye, but they didn't know what caused it. He said that something could have hurt his eye like that, but other things could cause it too, like eye diseases, eye infections, straining his eyes too much by looking at screens or even rubbing his eyes too hard. No one suspected Yo In-suk. She got a lot of money from the insurance company because of the accident. Because her plan worked, Yo In-suk now saw tricking the insurance company as her main way to make money. Lee was partially blind and needed her help, so they were always together. Over the next year and a half, Yo In-suk kept abusing him. Before each attack, she would give him a lot of antidepressants, making him weak, both physically and mentally. She poured boiling oil on his face, stabbed him in the stomach, and did other terrible things to him. She made them all look like accidents, so she could keep getting money from the insurance company. Lee had mental health problems, and Yo In-suk pretended to be a distraught and helpless wife, saying he hurt himself because of his depression, so people believed her lies. The drugs also made it hard for him to remember what happened. He trusted his wife, and even thanked her for always supporting him and worried about her. In January 2002, Yo In-suk stabbed her husband again in the stomach, and he had to stay in the hospital for 3 weeks. Soon after he got out, she attacked him again and hurt him even worse. She didn't want to pay the medical bills, so she came up with a new plan. While Lee was in the hospital, she became friends with a woman who was sharing his room. She put sleeping pills in the woman's strawberries. Once the woman was asleep, Yeom In-suk stole her credit card and used it to pay for her husband's medical bills. In 2 years, Yeom In-suk had attacked him many times and got 280 million won, about 210 US dollars from the insurance company. She used the money to buy whatever she wanted: hair treatments, spa days, designer clothes, and all kinds of expensive things. At her husband's funeral, Yeom In-suk pretended to be really sad and cried with his family. But that same night, she was already looking for her next victim at a bar. Can you believe that? She soon met Lin, a 30-year-old former martial arts instructor with an athletic body. Lin was really attracted to Yeom In-suk. He was really into her and started trying to date her. To make him even more interested, Yeom In-suk made up a story about her life. She said she graduated from a fancy university with a degree in education and was working as a kindergarten teacher. She said she came from a really rich family that was worth 10 billion won, that her older brother worked at a military school, and that her younger brother was studying in another country. Soon after they met, Yeom In-suk gave Lin a new SUV worth 320 million won. Lin thought he had found a beautiful rich woman who was clearly interested in him, and he was excited. It seemed like a dream come true. They quickly started dating. In May 2002, just 2 months after her husband's death, Yeom In-suk moved in with Lin and didn't tell him about her past. She acted like a rich and sophisticated woman. For a year, their relationship was pretty good, but she was still spending a lot of money, and she had almost spent all the insurance money. She needed money, so she decided to target Lin. But they weren't married, so she couldn't get insurance money as easily as she did with Lee. After thinking about it for a while, she came up with an evil plan. In November of that year, after dating for 6 months, Yeom In-suk did what she did before. She secretly gave Lin antidepressants. Even though he was athletic, the drugs still worked. Because he was weak from the drugs, she pushed him to the ground, and he broke his hip and tailbone. He had to stay in the hospital for 4 weeks. Yeom In-suk visited him every day, brought him home-cooked meals, and took good care of him. Seeing her chance, she talked about getting married so they could support each other. He believed she loved him, so he agreed and gave her his ID card. Can you believe she tricked him into marrying her? After leaving the hospital, Yeom In-suk went straight to the registry office and used their ID cards to get married without him knowing. Now she was his wife and would get all of the money from his life insurance policies. She bought a lot of policies from different companies, so she would get a lot of money if he died. Just a month after their secret marriage, Yeom In-suk started her plan. She drugged Lin and then stabbed him in the right eye. Can you believe she blinded him? She got 7 million, about 50, from the insurance company because of that. Over the next 3 months, she burned him multiple times, and each time she got more money from the insurance company, and he had to go to the hospital. His injuries got worse and worse. Why do you think she did that? Lin couldn't survive the abuse and manipulation. In February 2003, just 4 months after they got married, he died in the hospital from a severe allergic reaction. Yeom In-suk got a ton of money from 2 different insurance companies, 38.8 million from one and 38 million, about 27 from another, which was about 55 in total. Lin had never had any health problems before. He died less than 6 months after marrying Yeom In-suk, which made his family suspicious. But Yeom In-suk, who was 3 months pregnant at the time, pretended to be really sad. She begged and cried and promised to take care of their baby. They believed her and didn't think she did it. Because of her husband's death, Yeom In-suk didn't get as much money as she wanted. 3 months later, she had a premature baby. The baby was weak and needed to be taken care of all the time. And it seemed like a burden to Yeom In-suk, who kept living her life like nothing happened, spending her days with friends and shopping. The insurance money quickly disappeared. With each crime, Yeom In-suk became more and more evil, and her next target was even more shocking: her own family. In July 2003, 6 months after Lin died, Yeom In-suk started abusing her mother. That day, she visited her mother with a glass of pomegranate juice she had prepared, mixed with the right dose of antidepressants. Her mother, happy to see her daughter, drank the juice without suspicion and soon fell asleep. Yo Min-suk skillfully took out a syringe and stabbed her mother's right eye, causing cataracts and blindness. After the incident, she moved in with her mother, citing a reasonable excuse to take care of her. She lived with her mother, older brother, and younger brother under the same roof. For months later, Yo Min-suk invited her older brother out for drinks. While he wasn't paying attention, she put drugs in his drink. This time, she became even more brutal. She poured hydrochloric acid right into his eyes. This damaged his eyes badly and made him blind forever. He had to stay in the hospital for over 6 months. While he was in the hospital, maybe she was afraid of getting caught, so she tried to kill him by messing with his four. She added drugs that would relax his muscles and drugs for asthma, but the nurses noticed the extra drugs and stopped her. Even though she was doing all these violent things, Yo Min-suk's family had no idea about her evil plans. She was living her life like she didn't have a care in the world, spending all the insurance money. She wanted more and more things, so she sold their apartment. She said she would use the money, along with her own savings, to buy a new house in Seoul for the whole family. But really, she spent all the money on herself, shopping and having fun 6 days a week. She was living a really luxurious life. After 6 months in the hospital, Yo Min-suk's older brother came home. He was blind forever. Yo Min-suk used her charm and manipulation to fool her family. She lived with her blind mother and brother, and her younger brother, who was okay. The date they were supposed to move into their new house was getting closer, and Yo Min-suk was getting more and more scared and anxious. She didn't want to answer her family's questions. By January 2005, she couldn't keep lying anymore. The move-in date was getting closer, and she was trapped. She made a terrible decision. She was going to kill her own family. Can you believe she was going to kill her own family? Yo Min-suk made some pomegranate syrup with a lot of drugs in it for her mother, older brother, and younger brother. She tricked them into drinking it, saying it was good for their eyes. After they drank it, all 3 of them passed out. Then, Yo Min-suk set fire to a rug, and the apartment caught fire. She ran away. But her older brother woke up because of the smoke, and even though he was blind, he was able to wake up his mother and younger brother. They escaped the fire, but they were badly burned and had to go to the hospital. Can you believe she set the apartment on fire? Yo Min-suk got 204 million won, about 145,000 US dollars, from the insurance company. But now, she had to find somewhere to live. She asked her housekeeper for help. The housekeeper, Young, was kind and offered her a room in her home. But Young's husband and 2 young children also lived there, so it wasn't an ideal permanent arrangement. Yo Min-suk promised to pay rent and find another place to live as soon as possible, and said she wouldn't be a problem. But Yo Min-suk caused problems for the family. Her promises were lies. She was selfish and had no intention of moving out, and she didn't pay any rent. After a month, Young had enough and firmly asked Yo Min-suk to leave. Yo Min-suk was angry. She had never been treated like that before, and she wanted revenge. That night, she started her plan. After Young's family fell asleep, she set fire to their house. Can you believe she set the house on fire? The fire spread quickly. Young and her 2 children were badly burned, and sadly, Young's husband died in the fire. But Yo Min-suk still wanted revenge. She was afraid that Young would tell the police that she started the fire, so she decided to kill her. 2 weeks later, Yo Min-suk filled a plastic bottle with gasoline and put it in a shopping bag. She snuck into the hospital, where Young was being treated for burns, and lit the gasoline on fire in a stairwell. She wanted to burn down the hospital. Luckily, the hospital staff put out the fire quickly, so no one was hurt, and the hospital wasn't badly damaged. But this time, Yo Min-suk wasn't so lucky. She was caught on camera. The police quickly identified and arrested her. Yo Min-suk was beautiful, elegant, and good with words. No one would have thought she could do such terrible things. She pretended to have a mental breakdown in front of the police, crying and talking about her past. She talked about how traumatized she was after her daughter died and said she had an uncontrollable need to start fires because of it. She even said that she sometimes saw her daughter's image in the flames. She also claimed that her 3-year-old son was in the hospital with a rare illness and begged them to let her go so she could take care of him. Why would she lie about having a sick son? Unbelievably, the police officer in charge of the case believed her made-up story because the hospital fire didn't cause much damage or hurt anyone. Yo Min-suk was let go. Yo Min-suk's claims, however, were entirely fabricated. Her son was hospitalized, but with Kawasaki disease, a rare but treatable illness, typically affecting children under 5. He was receiving expensive medical care. While caring for him, Yo Min-suk had befriended a visitor of one of the other child's family within the same ward. Then, exploiting their trust, used their credit card without authorization. After a prolonged illness, on April honest, Yo Min-suk's son tragically died in the hospital. 2 days later, the other family noticed unauthorized charges on their credit card and contacted the friend who had incurred the expenses. The friend, in turn, confronted Yo Min-suk, demanding immediate repayment. This ignited Yo Min-suk's fury. That day, Yo Min-suk gave the woman drugs, hurt her right eye, and stole her credit card. She used it to pay for all of her son's medical bills, which cost 9 million won, about 6-0. Can you believe she did that to the woman who helped her? She was still angry, so a few days later, she went to see the woman again with a fake reason and injected her with something that gave her a high fever and caused her heart to stop 3 times. This really hurt her health. But Yo Min-suk's younger brother had become suspicious. He told the police what he was worried about. He thought his sister was involved in all the bad things happening to the people around her. 2 husbands had died from accidents. Family members were blind and burned, and even the housekeeper's family had been in a terrible fire. It seemed like too many coincidences. The police knew it was serious and started an investigation. What they found was shocking. Since 2000, Yo Min-suk had kept targeting her loved ones and using them to get money from different insurance companies. She had gotten a total of 600 million won, about $430 US. Because she had no criminal record and seemed so innocent, none of the insurance companies thought she was doing anything wrong. Yo Min-suk was a predator, even though she looked innocent. The police had a lot of evidence against her, so they arrested her. When she was arrested, she was with another man. The police think he was going to be her next victim. Yo Min-suk's family was shocked when she was arrested. They couldn't believe that all the terrible things that happened to them weren't accidents, but were planned by her. Reporters asked her a lot of questions, like why she would hurt her own family. Yo Min-suk got angry and blamed other people. She said she was the real victim and talked about how much she had suffered. She didn't explain why she did it, and even said she didn't understand why she did it. When the police questioned her, Yo Min-suk admitted to most of the accusations. When they asked her why she always wanted more money, she said she was addicted to shopping and always had to have expensive things. But people who knew her didn't believe that. The police gave her drug tests, but the results were negative. A psychiatrist said that she wasn't insane when she committed the crimes, and that she was responsible for what she did. She was just acting weak and crazy, trying to trick them into thinking she was mentally ill so she could get a shorter sentence. The police said that her need to buy things and her huge ego caused her to do these things. She always had to have what she wanted, no matter what. According to news reports, Yo Min-suk took the PCLR test, which is used to see if someone is a psychopath. She got a perfect score of 40. That was higher than other famous serial killers, which means she was probably born a psychopath. Can you believe she got a perfect score on the psychopath test? In October 2005, her trial started at the Seoul Central District Court. In South Korea, being a psychopath is considered a personality problem, not a mental illness. So they didn't believe her when she said she wasn't in control of her actions. Over 5 years, she had attacked people, set fires, committed fraud, and done a lot of other crimes. She was charged with 24 different crimes. 3 innocent people died, and 2 of her family members were blind forever. Yo Min-suk didn't feel sorry for what she did. She didn't even apologize. The prosecution wanted her to get a long sentence because she didn't care about human life and had hurt her victims and their families so much. But her lawyers said that she had seen a psychiatrist and taken medication after her daughter died. The court thought about her past, her job, her education, and other things that might make her sentence shorter, and they thought she might be able to change. On October 27, the Seoul Central District Court found Yo Min-suk guilty on all 9 counts and sentenced her to life in prison. A year later, the Supreme Court agreed with the verdict. Yo Min-suk was sent to Changju Women's Correctional Institution, the only women's prison in South Korea, where she would spend the rest of her life. The case shocked everyone. A lot of news channels wanted to interview her to understand why she did those terrible things, but she refused. She said she couldn't sleep because she was so violent and manipulative. Some people wondered if she was involved in her daughter's death. Maybe it wasn't just an accident. Yo Min-suk didn't answer these questions, and no one knows the answer. Lin's sister, the sister of In-suk's second husband, once visited the prison to ask her directly about her true thoughts when committing the crimes. However, Yo Min-suk refused to meet, completely unwilling to appear. Later, rumors spread that In-suk had attempted suicide in prison, but this was denied. To this day, she is living in prison, refusing all visits or interviews, cutting off all contact with the outside world. We may never completely understand why Yo Min-suk did these terrible things. Andrew Philip Kinnunen was born on August 31, 1969 in California, and he was the youngest of 4 kids. He was handsome and came from a wealthy family, so he was admired by many and was the perfect golden child. He got a ton of love and attention from his parents, more than his siblings. He seemed to live the life that others only dreamed about. But under this shiny surface, a darker side started to show. This led him into the world of sugar daddies like fashion icon Gianni Versace and eventually down a path filled with terrible crimes. What made Andrew Cunanan murder the famous designer? And what secrets were hidden in their secret relationship? At 8:05 a.m., on a Miami beach in Florida, USA, the fashion genius and founder of the renowned brand, Gianni Versace, enjoyed his tea at a cafe, as he did every day. He frequented this spot because it was conveniently close to his mansion. After breakfast and tea, Johnny stood up, stretched, and headed back home. However, just as he reached the entrance of his mansion, a handsome man suddenly appeared from behind and fired 2 gunshots, leaving Johnny with no chance of survival. A passerby who saw the bold attack chased after the shooter, but the killer waved his gun around, so the witness had to back off. The police arrived quickly and closed off the area. They found a red pickup truck left in a parking lot near Versace's mansion, and get this, the truck belonged to another murder victim. The victim, William Reese, had been found dead just days earlier. Inside the truck, investigators found some men's clothes. They also found a passport and documents that talked about other murders, and they all pointed to the same guy, Andrew Philip Cunanan. The police already knew who he was. Andrew Philip Cunanan was on the run from the police. He was one of the FBI's most wanted criminals. In the past few months, he had murdered 4 people, and Gianni Versace was his 5th victim. Everyone was wondering, why was Andrew Cunanan killing all these rich people? Was it because of greed or revenge? Or were these murders that didn't seem connected just a bunch of random, terrible things happening? The fact that Andrew Cunanan killed Gianni Versace in such a public way, right on the steps of his Miami Beach mansion, made people think they knew each other. But investigators had already found out that Cunanan's stories about coming from a rich family weren't true. His parents gave him nice things, but they didn't give him the love and support that parents should. Over the years, Andrew has attracted a number of wealthy businessmen, thanks to a skilled lying and handsome face. He worked as a male escort and later led a prostitution ring, causing these wealthy men to willingly pay large sums to sponsor him. With many rich sugar daddies, some were even blatantly swindled out of their entire fortunes without realizing it. Through this method, Andrew was able to live a lavish life, indulging in endless spending pleasures. So why did he take the risk of continuously murdering 5 people? What was the relationship between the victims and him? Could it be that all of them were his sugar daddies? To understand why Andrew Cunanan did what he did, we need to look at his childhood and where he grew up. Andrew Philip Cunanan was born on August 31, 1969, in National City, California. He was the oldest of 4 kids. His dad, Modesto Cunanan, was Filipino-American, and his mom, Marian Chialachi, was Italian-American. Their marriage was full of tension. Modesto, who was in the U.S. Navy, was rarely home. Since the couple spent very little time together, after a while Modesto began to suspect that his wife was having an affair with the neighbor. He was convinced that Andrew's sister, Helen, was not his biological daughter. Meanwhile, Mary Ann, a devout Christian who valued marital fidelity, criticized her husband for being so busy that he stayed away for months, leaving her to handle all 4 children on her own. Modesto should have been grateful to her for this and understood the struggles of a mother, but instead, he criticized and doubted her, making it unbearable for her. Their arguments got worse, and Modesto started hitting her. After Andrew was born, Mary Ann had really bad postpartum depression, made worse by Modesto going to Vietnam for the war. When he came back, he wanted to make things better and gave all his attention and love to his youngest son, Andrew. He gave Andrew a lot of love and special treatment, the best of everything, the biggest bedroom, the best food, the fanciest clothes. Even before Andrew could drive, Modesto gave him a small sports car for his birthday. He bragged to others about Andrew being smart, saying he had a genius-level IQ and predicted a great future for his smart son, taking all the credit for helping him be so smart. In such an environment, Andrew gradually began to see himself as the center of everything. For him, money was everything, and the pursuit of a perfect appearance took precedence over all else. On the other hand, Andrew grew up in an unhappy family. He had to witness his father abuse his mother, and in response, chose to ignore it by locking himself in his bedroom and blasting music to drown out his mother's desperate cries. The young boy's soul was already deeply wounded. Andrew began to resent his mother for being a victim, loathing her weakness for not standing up to his father, while admiring his father's strength and authority. This messed up way of thinking is common when there's violence at home. Without the right guidance and support, kids can get a wrong idea about the world, blaming the victim and thinking the abuser is great. This can make them more likely to do the same kind of bad things when they grow up. Even when he was young, Andrew was arrogant and liked to lie, which was a sign of how manipulative he would become. To hide the problems his parents were having, Andrew told his friends his parents had a perfect marriage and that they were really happy. Sometimes he convinced himself that he had Jewish heritage and even claimed to be the son of a millionaire in the Philippines, elevating his father to the status of the richest and most devoted man in the world, a handsome and wonderful father. But people often found out he was lying, and they made fun of him. But sometimes he really did have a privileged life. One time his mom made him a fancy lobster lunch while his classmates ate plain peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Andrew showed off how rich he was and loved the attention from his teachers and classmates. He loved that they were jealous, and he loved feeling better than everyone else. When he was a teenager, Andrew realized he was attracted to men. He was totally okay with it, without any shame or confusion. He was open about being gay, and went to gay bars a lot in San Diego. He had casual relationships with different men. In the 1990s, the sex trade in San Diego was out of control, and some young people just wanted to party and have fun all the time. Andrew became part of this world and started his own businesses in the sex industry. He didn't like being half Filipino and half Italian, so he pretended to be Latino. He thought that would make him more attractive to clients. He used the names Andrew Da Silva and David Morales. He was really good at disguises and good at using makeup to change how he looked, so he created different looks for every client. Every Friday night, he would carefully create a new look for his nights out with rich men. On Saturday nights, he completely changed his look and went to gay bars a lot to find new victims. This double life helped him trick his rich clients. After working in the SX trade for a while, Andrew realized that younger clients didn't have as much money as he wanted, so he wasn't making enough money. He started focusing on older, richer men and going to fancy clubs to make friends with potential sugar daddies. And it worked. The older men he met were rich and generous. One even bought him a car as a welcome gift. Can you believe that? Andrew made sure he looked respectable. He wore designer suits, expensive watches, and had perfect manners. This helped him do well in the world of high-end escorts and sugar daddies. Andrew was doing really well as a SX worker, so he quit college to focus on that. But when he was 19, his world fell apart. His dad had been in the Navy, and after he retired, he became a stockbroker. But then he was accused of stealing 100, so he took all the money from the family's accounts and ran away to the Philippines. To cover up the cracks in his parents' relationship, Andrew often boasted to his friends that his parents were the perfect couple, incredibly harmonious and loving toward each other. Sometimes, he convinced himself that he had Jewish heritage, and even claimed to be the son of a millionaire in the Philippines, elevating his father to the status of the richest and most devoted man in the world, a handsome and wonderful father. During a bad argument, Andrew attacked his mother and hurt her shoulder really badly, so they had to live apart. His family was falling apart, and Andrew hoped that finding his dad would make things better. He bought a plane ticket to Manila, but when he got there, he was really disappointed. His dad was living in a rundown house in really bad condition. It didn't even have proper plumbing. This was totally different from the image Andrew had in his mind, his dad wearing gold jewelry, looking rich and successful. This was a terrible shock for Andrew, who was already unstable. He wanted to leave and go back to the United States, but he didn't have the money for a ticket, so he started doing sex work for money. But the Philippines wasn't like the places where rich people hang out in San Diego. There weren't any generous sugar daddies, just creepy and unpleasant people. He even dressed as a woman to attract clients. This terrible experience in the Philippines was a turning point in Andrew's life. It really messed him up and probably made him more violent later on. Andrew moved to San Francisco and started working again as an escort for rich people in the Castro district, which has a big gay community. There he met a lot of important people, including a 60-year-old millionaire named Norman Blackford. Blackford owned a successful company that soundproofed cars for movies and even won an Oscar for it. Norman gave Andrew a lot of gifts, like a car and a credit card. He could spend as much as he wanted on. But then Norman figured out that Andrew wasn't who he said he was. He wasn't really Andrew de Silva, the heir to a pineapple plantation. Norman felt tricked and ended the relationship. In April 1997, Andrew flew to Minnesota, where David Madsen picked him up from the airport. Andrew had met David for a short time when he was with Norman. Even though he wasn't with Norman anymore, Andrew stayed in touch with David and had a crush on him. David planned to hang out with Andrew for a week, and they were going to go to some gay bars together. But just 2 days after Andrew arrived, they found out something shocking about David. He was married in secret. He was living 2 different lives and hiding his relationships with men from his wife. At David's apartment, Andrew murdered his ex-lover called T. T used to be in the Navy, and now he worked in the propane business. T and Andrew met in 1992 and had a passionate but also dramatic relationship for years. They were really close, even though they were very different. T was a hard-working and kind man who was really protective of Andrew. Andrew and T bumped into each other in Minneapolis, and Andrew was furious when he found out T was with someone else. He was feeling betrayed and angry. So he asked T to meet him at David's place to talk. They got into a big fight. Andrew had been abandoned by his parents and manipulated by bad people, and now his lover was betraying him. He just lost it. He was so angry after years of pain that he grabbed a claw hammer and killed T with it. Then he wrapped T's body in a rug, stole his gun, and left the apartment. When this happened, David was out walking his dog. He didn't know what had just happened in his apartment. When he got back, he found Andrew Cunanan covered in blood. Can you imagine how scared David must have been? Andrew pointed a gun at David and threatened him to make sure he didn't tell anyone, and then he forced David to leave with him. When the police were looking for David, they found T's body. No one had touched the crime scene. Andrew didn't even try to clean up or hide the evidence. He even left behind a bag with photos and his name on purpose, a way of making fun of the police. Days later, some campers at East Rush Lake in northern Minnesota found David Madsen's body. He had been shot 3 times in the head and back. After killing those 2 men, Andrew drove David's car to Chicago. He targeted a famous TV personality and businesswoman who sold cosmetics named Marilyn McGlynn. That night, Marilyn was away on business, and only her husband, 72-year-old rich real estate guy Lee McGlynn, was home. The police revealed that they had no idea how the killer had broken into the mansion. However, It was certain that that night, Andrew had tortured Mr. Lee brutally. Lee's entire body was wrapped tightly in tape, resembling a mummy, and subjected to savage violence. His neck was cut, and his bones were broken all over. Although the Lee family denied knowing Andrew, the FBI believed this was merely an attempt to protect the family's reputation. Andrew had no reason to harbor hatred toward a stranger. At Lee Miglin's house, the FBI found David Madsen's car, which connected him to the other crimes. It was clear that Andrew Cunanan was the killer, and he quickly became one of America's 10 most wanted criminals. But strangely enough, instead of running away, Andrew calmly took a shower and shaved, looked in the fridge for some ham and orange juice, and then took a nap. Can you believe this guy? He didn't leave until the next day, and he left in Miglin's Lexus. Before leaving Chicago, Andrew stole some of Lee Miglin's designer clothing. The FBI was tracking the Lexus with its GPS and watched where he was going, but he knew they were tracking him. So before he got to Philadelphia, he turned off the tracker, smashed it, and threw it out the window. Then he left the Lexus and disappeared. A month later, one evening, a 45-year-old cemetery caretaker in New Jersey named William Reese didn't come home for dinner as usual. His wife, deeply worried after waiting for him without any sign of his return, rushed to the cemetery to check. When she opened the office door, the sight before her left her in shock. Her husband was shot, lying in a pool of blood with no signs of life. The police investigated and concluded that the murderer was the infamous serial killer, Andrew. Andrew, the serial killer, had murdered Reese with the motive of stealing his car. While fleeing, Andrew happened to pass by the cemetery and noticed Reese's vehicle, a red Chevrolet pickup truck. At that moment, he suddenly rushed into the house, held a gun to Reese's head, and demanded the car keys. After obtaining the keys, Andrew fired the gun, ensuring that Reese wouldn't survive. 3 days later, Andrew was spotted at Miami Beach. He was staying in room 322 at the Normandy Hotel. According to investigation reports, Andrew used fake passport and driver's license credentials, paying for the hotel room with cash. Furthermore, he didn't bring any luggage with him. Despite being placed on the most wanted list across the United States, Andrew was skilled at disguising himself, making it hard to recognize him as a fugitive. The hotel manager was even charmed by him and agreed to charge him only $700 per month for the room. Andrew lived there as if nothing had happened for 2 months. Every night, he would visit a gay bar to seek out his pleasures. On the morning of July 15th, Johnny Versace left his mansion to do his usual morning thing, buying newspapers and having coffee. He had no idea that he was about to be killed. As Versace was going up the steps to his house, Andrew Cunanan appeared and shot him twice in the head in the middle of the day. Versace's boyfriend and a friend were inside the mansion when they heard the gunshots. They rushed outside and saw the killer running away. They chased Andrew for a moment, but he threatened them with his gun and got away. Everyone panicked, and people who saw it immediately called the police. They said that after the shooting, Andrew was strangely calm. He wasn't displaying the typical frantic behavior of a murderer. People started saying that maybe Johnny and Andrew had a relationship before, maybe even one where they paid each other for sex. Some people said they met in the VIP section of a nightclub in San Francisco, and Andrew came on to Johnny. But the Versace family said that Johnny had rejected Andrew. 8 days after the murder, an older couple came back to their houseboat in Miami Beach. They heard noises inside, and they knew someone was in there. The husband carefully went inside to see what was going on. Then, bang, a gunshot echoed through the houseboat. The scared couple ran away and immediately called the police. Around 8 p.m., a large police force arrived at the scene. Helicopters circled above the sky, and all the surrounding roads were blocked off. Live footage aired on television, showing Princess Diana attending the funeral of Johnny. At the scene, police discovered a male body on the second floor of the house. The victim was a 27-year-old man, Andrew Cunanan himself. He had taken his own life with a gunshot to the head. The crime scene left little evidence. No will, no journal, and Andrew's bank accounts were drained. The police only found a handgun, some tubes of steroids, and a large collection of books by C.S. Lewis. Around 10 p.m., news spread across the United States that Andrew Kinnunen had died. The manhunt for the killer of Versace ended there. Regarding Andrew's motive, some speculated that he might have contracted AIDS while in Cherokee and had no way of treating it. Unwilling to surrender, he chose to take his own life on July 15th. There were two reasons for this speculation. First, Andrew had been involved with several partners, making the likelihood of contracting the disease very high. Secondly, police found corticoid creams in the room where Andrew committed suicide. These creams are primarily used for conditions like kidney failure, rheumatoid arthritis, skin allergies, eczema, and itching. It is believed that Andrew may have used these creams to alleviate the skin-related pain caused by AIDS. Back then, being gay was a taboo topic, not talked about openly. Andrew and many of his victims kept this secret until they died. The question, what is the real truth, is still unanswered and remains a mystery. Looking back at Andrew Kinnunen's short and troubled life, his biggest flaw seemed to be his obsession with showing off, along with a dislike for ordinary life and a never-ending craving for fast money. He didn't understand the importance of hard work and instead chose to live off others by lying. To keep up his fake image of being rich and privileged, he created a complicated web of lies, with each lie needing another lie to support it. He wanted more and more expensive things, more exciting experiences, and more unusual relationships, his wants getting out of control.